Hi, everybody. Jeremy Plonk here from First Bet and Express Bet. Welcome in to the It's Official podcast. Each Tuesday, I take on 5 hot topics in horse racing. And of course, with the Preakness Stakes 150 now in the rearview mirror, we are 2/3 of the way through the Triple Crown. That'll be a heavy dose of what we talk about today. As far as this week in racing, not as much in the dramatics. We're kind of pulling back and waiting towards the Belmont now 3 weeks away, but we've got some new tracks opening this week. Canterbury Park opens its doors on Saturday for the racing season. Got a big stakes day in Southern California with the California Gold Rush as well at Santa Anita this weekend. Should be a good weekend of racing, but certainly the big topics we want to talk about happened this past Friday and Saturday at Pimlico. Let's go to the big board for our first of 5 hot topics on the board this week. Journalist roof. We're going to talk about raising the roof in just a bit, but he certainly blew the top off the place on Saturday at Pimlico with a stirring stretch run. Let's take you through the full call of Preakness number 150, and then we'll tell you all about the fallout from journalism's victory in the Middle Jewel.
They're off in the Preakness, and journalism is out very fast, but Clever again is the quickest and will take the lead with Longshot Gosker going up on the outside. So it's going to be these two to set the pace as they make that final trip past this historic grandstand. And then it's goal-oriented running in third and Hart held on the inside. And then American Promise in fourth. Journalism broke very well, but he's down on the inside moving into the turn as River Thames goes up 3 wide. Then Pay Billy Heart of Honor and late running Sandman is racing 9 lengths from the front as they round that turn. 23.19 the opening quarter mile. And that's set by Clever again. And Jose Ortiz, they're out there by a length and a half over Gosker in second. Goal Oriented is tucked in third. Then to the outside comes River Thames. American Promise, the D. Wayne Lucas runner under Nick Juarez, is fifth right now. 4 lengths from the front, and Umberto Rispoli has journalism just to his inside, now being nudged along to keep up his journalism. He nudged along here up the backstretch with 5 lengths to make up. Then Pay Billy, Sandman at the back with Heart of Honor. The half mile was 46.66 seconds. They make their way into the far turn. Clever again and Gosker, and these two are right together on the lead with River Thames running in third. Goal-oriented is fourth. American Promise fifth on the outside. Journalism is still sixth. He's got a lot of ground to cover. He is still 5 lengths behind as they make their way toward the top of the stretch. Gosker, trying to pull off a huge upset here, has taken the lead on the outside. Clever again cuts the corner. Journalism is getting closer now. He's behind a wall of horses. He's looking for a place to go, and he's got nowhere to go. Oh, he bumped hard with goal-oriented. In the meanwhile, Gosker's running the race of his life, and Sandman has entered the scene, and he has moved up on the far outside. Journalism is still running on. He's back into second. He might even win it. Here's the wire. Oh, my goodness. Journalism has won the Preakness Stakes in a performance like you read about.
We'll be talking about that one for a long time to come. Now let's talk about the performance. We'll get into the ride. We'll get into all the particulars with that, but let's just talk about the victory in itself. In the Kentucky Derby, it was a somewhat good finish for journalism, but not the great finish that we had seen in his previous races. When you look at the numbers, the brisk late pace figures, which I put a lot of stock into late into races, he was back where he needed to be, a 107 brisk late pace figure, and he needed every bit of that in the Preakness. Those were the kind of massive late numbers he was putting up on the Derby trail, and in the Kentucky Derby, only mustered that 88, whether it was the wet track, whether it was the 1.25 mile distance, whether it was him not responding to a horse that was outside or the left-handed stick. We'll never know. We can't relitigate the Kentucky Derby. Maybe we'll get a rematch with Sovereignty down the road as soon as the Belmont Stakes. But it was a different scenario. He certainly had to deal with horses to his outside and to his inside in this Preakness Stakes. But that final 1/8 of a mile, that's what it was all about. And that's where he kind of showed the heart and the length of his stride of a champion and really gobbled up the ground. Larry Comas almost caught off guard. I think in Larry's call, he was about to say he's still in second, and then he said he's still in with a chance he might win it. You know, it was one of those that caught all of us watching the race certainly off guard. Reminiscent, of course, a lot of people right away said to a Fleet Alex in 2005 when he came off the turn. If you remember that 2005 Preakness Stakes, it was Scrappy T to the inside, and with a big overhand left-handed stick, it was Ramon Dominguez going to Scrappy T and caught him off guard to where he bolted to the outside and almost took down a Fleet Alex. Similar in the trouble, and then in the finish and the determination, it brought back memories to me if you've ever seen the 1988 Breeders' Cup Distaff at Churchill Downs, where the undefeated Personal Ensign was trying to reel in the Derby winner, the great filly Winning Colors that year. Winning Colors, like Oscar, looked gone and clear, and then just that was the heart of the champion that we saw with Personal Ensign that year. Just every stride getting closer and closer and closer and closer until she finally got there. Same kind of scenario that we saw here. So, when you're equal parts of Fleet Alex and Personal Ensign, you've turned in a performance that people are not going to forget about, and there's no question about that. As for the others in the Preakness Stakes, Gosger, what an effort he put in. This was just the fourth career start for Gosger, and when you look at his previous races, had never been beyond a mile and a 16th. That was his only two-turn race, was the Lexington Stakes that he won at Keeneland. But this son of Nyquist, the Derby winner from 2017 and the Preakness runner-up that year to his rival Exaggerator, the son of Nyquist, Gosger, he ran an absolute cracker, because you think about that race at Keeneland in the Lexington Stakes, that finished at the 16th pole. So not only was this his first race beyond the mile and a 16th, this was his first race using the entire length of the stretch. And what a difference that extra 16th of a mile of running in the straight made to the outcome of this race, right? I mean, you think, what would Gosger have won the Preakness by at the 16th pole, right? He was a good solid 3-4 lengths in front. I do think he got a +3 by all that trouble going on down on the inside, because he was about a length in front, but while the others started to play bumper cars, next thing you knew, he was 4 in front. And I don't think he was going that fast based on the GPS and the tracking stats and the come home time. So I think he was kind of a beneficiary of all the bumper cars going on, and that allowed him to kind of spurt clear because he was running, without incident. So I think he benefited some, obviously, from the trip, but he also made the race. He made the running. He did what we call the dirty work in racing. Gosger was running second behind a very heated pace in the Preakness Stakes. They went the first 6 furlongs of the Preakness with Asmussen's horse going to the front, and they're Clever Again. They went the first 6 furlongs of the Preakness faster than we saw in the stakes race that Booth won earlier on the card. In fact, there were 3 6-furlong stakes races on the program. All 3 of them went slower, including Booth in the Maryland Sprint, than the 6-furlong split of the Preakness. So they were cooking up front, and Gosger was first over. I mean, you could say, oh, that's a dream trip. You're on the outside sitting second. But that's also the horse who's got to go after that leader and got to keep them honest. And he did that with Clever Again. And, of course, Clever Again was already starting to tire when all the incident happened. So I think he was done, and he was kind of out of horse. He may be more of a mile and a 16 type runner. Steve Asmussen's going to send Clever Again to the turf next, interestingly, and we will see how that horse ends up. But with his pedigree by American Pharoah out of a Galileo mare, there is a ton of turf pedigree there. And the American Pharaohs, frankly, have been better on the turf. Most of American Pharaoh's best offspring have been turf mares, turf fillies. So Clever Again, maybe a future on the grass. That's what they're going to try next, Asmussen says. So with the wind chills owning them and their stake in Kentucky Downs, I would not be surprised if Clever Again's big goal later this year is something there in southern Kentucky, there in Franklin at Kentucky Downs. So interesting pass that they'll take out of this race. Gosger with that really strong effort. He's going to come back to the Belmont Stakes. In fact, let's take a look at the Belmont probables right now as we talk about the fallout to this Preakness Stakes. Gosger and Journalism, the top 2 out of the Preakness, expected back, as well as Heart of Honor, 5th place finisher. Heart of Honor never threatened to win this race, but certainly didn't embarrass himself. Rallied from 8th of 9, ended up in here 5th, and the margin of defeat was 8 3/4 lengths. Never threatened for the top end, but they talked going into it, Jamie Osborne, the trainer, they talked about this almost as a prep towards the Belmont. They wanted to see where they fit. Heart of Honor ran well enough to stay in the U.S. and will head next to the Belmont Stakes. Could be 3 horses out of the Preakness. Could be 3 horses out of the Kentucky Derby. Just 3 horses out of the Kentucky Derby if Journalism opts to go to the Belmont Stakes. New shooters towards the Belmont would include Rodriguez, hopefully. I mean, he was expected to be in the Kentucky Derby after the Wood Memorial. Foot problems sidetracked him from that. It also kept him out of running in the Preakness Stakes. So he's kind of up in the air, but that would be Bob Baffert's rep in the Belmont Stakes. And Chad Brown's got Hill Road, winner of the Peter Pan Stakes, and a good third earlier this year in the Tampa Bay Derby before he missed the Wood Memorial with the fever. So his missed time in April might end up benefiting Hill Road as they move towards the Belmont Stakes next with that one. But just to field the 7 right now we're looking at for the Belmont Stakes could obviously be a Kentucky Derby 1, 2, 3 rematch between Sovereignty, Journalism, and Baeza if they all make it to the gate. One of the interesting takeaways here, though, is we see 2 Kentucky Derby starters, maybe a third if Journalism moves on to the Belmont. That is the expectation that he will if he comes out of the Preakness healthy and happy. He's already vanned from Baltimore to Saratoga Springs. He's bedded down in upstate New York already. So the plan is for Journalism, if he bounces out of this race well, to go ahead and take on that third and final leg of the Triple Crown. But for all the people who are belly aching about how the Derby and the Preakness and producing horses from the Derby to the Preakness and the drop-off, and you've got to keep these horses together, we need 5 weeks in between races. There are only 2 Derby horses who took the 5 weeks and are going to show up for the Belmont Stakes, those being Sovereignty and Baeza. So it's not like we got this long laundry list of 7, 8 horses out of the Derby who decided to skip the Preakness and go on to the Belmont. Just 2 of them in that category. Maybe we get 3 starters back from the Derby to the Belmont if Journalism makes that trek. And of course, we had 3 horses from the Derby to the Preakness with everybody talking about how, we must change the spacing between the Triple Crown races. That would tell you the way that 2025 has played out, at least if you're going to take these short run and knee-jerk reactions. 2025 has shown just putting 5 weeks between the races does not guarantee a large carryover of horses from the first leg to the third leg of the Triple Crown. As for Sandman, he's running the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown. Trainer Mark Casse says he'll now get some time off and work towards a summer campaign. I would expect that Sandman probably at the Jim Dandy at 1 1/8 might be his best shot. I don't think he can go this far. He's just not a classic distance horse. The tap at the dam side of his pedigree is light on distance, and I think it's showing up for him. Again, a big menacing move for Sandman in this race, and then just flattened out. I mean, he was ahead, really. I mean, he kind of was already had passed Journalism, and Journalism ran by him again once getting in the clear in the stretch. I just don't think Sandman can go this far. I think his races where he did win the Arkansas Derby at 1 1/8 was situational. It was a great pace setup for him, and he got the shape and he got the victory that day. I think Sandman with good horses is going to struggle to win any of these kind of majors going along. I still think, like going into the Preakness, we talked about the similarities with Sandman and his Mark Casse stablemate or stable predecessor. He was never in the barn at the same time as War of Will, the 2019 eventual Preakness winner. But War of Will's script was written later in his career that he became a grade 1 winner on turf going a mile at Keeneland. I kind of think that's the best case scenario that we're going to see for War of Will. If War of Will is a grade 1 winner at any point in his career, I predict it'll be in a turf mile and maybe at Keeneland. Of course, races at Keeneland like that in the spring and the fall. Casse supports the meet strongly. And again, he's had success with War of Will going that route eventually. I kind of think that's the best case scenario moving forward for Sandman. And let's talk a little bit about the trip here for Journalism in the Preakness Stakes. We're going to get into the details of all the traffic and the trouble, but the indecisiveness of Umberto Rispoli was on display. We saw a little bit of this in some of the previous races, specifically the Santa Anita Derby. He's always had horses hounding him from the Bob Baffert barn. If you look at the first turn of the San Felipe, we've talked about that, how he was hemmed in there by the Bafferts. Same thing happened to him on the far turn of the Santa Anita Derby. In the Kentucky Derby, the same thing from the Baffert barn, and he got into it again with a Baffert trainee, goal-oriented, here in the Preakness Stakes. I don't know if that's a series of coincidences or a series of riding instructions from the trainer that said, we've got one horse to beat in these races. Make sure that he doesn't beat you. You never know. I mean, this is strategy. This is sports. This is competition. And you're not going to get a straight answer on what that strategy was going into the race. You're only left to speculation and then the past performances to review. And the past performances tell me 4 straight races a Bob Baffert trainee has been pinned and glued to Journalism. I don't think they planned on being pinned and glued to Journalism in this particular case because I think Rispoli took them to that spot. But the part of indecision that I want you to follow here is right around the half-mile marker. You're going to see the 2 horse with the overhead shot here journalism. Reese Bully's got a chance to go to the outside. You see, he's in sixth place right now with the red cap, and right there he goes to the outside, and then he says, nah, I don't think so. I'm going to go back to the inside. That was his move of indecisiveness, where he could have went around traffic and probably easily swept by this group. Sandman was able to do the same thing. So it's that split-second move. And when you talk about are jockeys important or not, I hear this all the time. Oh, the rider doesn't matter. The best horse could take the worst jockey and the best jockey to the same result. Split-second decisions are worth several lengths. And you think about the number of lengths potentially lost in getting stopped in this race for journalism versus going wide, where he would have lost some ground for sure, and he would have had to make up that footage and lost ground, but he wouldn't have lost any momentum, and he wouldn't have lost any lengths in terms of that stoppage and then having to restart. You need a horse with gears to be able to pull that off. But split-second decisions, I mean, every beat is worth, every fifth of a second is worth a length. And when you talk about these races coming down to narrow margins, I mean, the Kentucky Derby was what, a length and a half. So what is that in terms of fifths of a second? A length and a half is 1.5 of a fifth. I mean, it's not even 2/5 of a second. So, 2/5 of a second is the difference between second and winning in the Kentucky Derby, when you thought, well, that was a pretty comfortable victory by Sovereignty. He pulled away. 2/5 of a second different in decision-making gets you a different result, perhaps. Journalism wins this race by a half a length. I mean, we're talking about 1/10 of a second, not 1/5. If we're saying a length is about a fifth or 1/6 really of a second, then, you're really looking at about 1/10 of a second difference in winning and losing. So all these decisions add up and they matter. And they're going to bring Umberto Reese Bully's ride into some question as far as his decision-making goes. Plenty of braveness. There are plenty of plaudits to give. I thought his last eighth of a mile was absolutely fantastic in this race. Reese Bully was able to finish up strongly on the horse. We'll talk about that final eighth here as we get through a couple more topics. But let's go to our second topic this week on the big board. And of course, we talked about the raising of the roof of journalism. Well, they're going to raise the roof, the building, and everything at Pimlico except the main track and turf course as we say goodbye to Old Hilltop. 1870 to 2025, it'll say on the epitaph. But Pimlico is expected to be back in 2 years' time. And as we go through some of the images, courtesy of Eclipse Sports Wire and their great photographers of the final Preakness at Pimlico, we talk about this track that was opened in 1870 when there were only 37 states in America. The current grandstand and a lot of the facility that's going to be knocked down was built in the 1950s. Right now, over 75 years old. You think about Yankee Stadium being demolished and rebuilt across the street in the Bronx. That was 85 years old when they got rid of Yankee Stadium. Fenway Park, 113 years old. Preakness and Pimlico, 155 years. 150 years for the Preakness Stakes, 155 years for the venerable facility there at Old Hilltop. Now, they're going to be rebuilt with a new stadium. It's going to seat about 5,000 people. It's going to be a totally different look than a big cavernous grandstand, similar to what we're seeing at Belmont Park that's under reconstruction now, where 7,500 seats will be in the new Belmont Park. That's expected to open in September of 2026. As for Pimlico, next year's Preakness slated to be run at Laurel Park, about a half hour, 40 minutes away, going due west, if you will, from the city of Baltimore over towards the Washington, D.C. metro area. And Laurel Park expected to host just one Preakness Stakes, according to the plan. The plan is to be back in Baltimore for the 2027 Preakness Stakes. Now, that might sound very ambitious. The track now is run by the state of Maryland and a new Maryland Racing Authority, but also the Stadium Authority of Maryland is a part of this reconstruction project. The Maryland Stadium Authority built M&T Bank Stadium in 2 years' time. That for the Baltimore Ravens. That's just really in the same complex where we have Camden Yards in downtown Baltimore. Camden Yards took 33 months to build, so they got a little quicker. Camden Yards is the older of those, built right around 1990-ish. M&T Bank Stadium came on a little bit later than that, and they were able to build M&T Bank Stadium 6 weeks ahead of schedule and built in 2 years' time. So if that's the case, maybe we can hit this deadline for the action at Pimlico to return in 2 years' time for the Preakness Stakes. But it seems like an awfully auspicious ambitious deadline to set 2 years to rebuild all that needs to be done, all the barn area. Of course, a training center is going to be going up in northern Maryland, closer to the Pennsylvania border, north of Baltimore. You think about the big incident in the Inner Harbor a few years ago with the ship that hit the Key Bridge. The Key Bridge being rebuilt by the government, of course, in the state of Maryland. 4 years' time, the Army Corps of Engineers says it's going to take to rebuild the Key Bridge. Can they build Pimlico back in half the time of the Key Bridge? It'll be very interesting to see. But Pimlico, when we say goodbye to that grand old facility, I mean, you think about this as the place where the Pimlico Special of 1938, one of the most famous races of all time, the match race between Seabiscuit and War Admiral that year, Sunday Silence and Easy Goer in 1989. What an absolute kismet of a situation where Trevor Denman had 1 year that he called races at Pimlico, and it was the year of Sunday Silence and Easy Goer in 1989. I remember that. I was a junior in high school in 1989, graduated the next year. Easy Goer, Sunday Silence, one of the most famous races of all time, those two digging it out at Pimlico. And of course, this is the track, Pimlico, and the Maryland scene that created such riders as Chris McCarran and Ken Tesormo, and started the careers of guys like Edgar Prado and Ramon Dominguez. I mean, Hall of Famers left and right have kind of grown up and graced these grounds. Rosie Napravnik, one of the all-time leading jockeys amongst the female riders coming through the scene at Pimlico. The oval is going to stay at Pimlico. The turf course, there'll probably be some changes to the drainage and things like that. But overall, they're going to keep the track the way it is. When they look at moving the racetrack and changing the overall geometry and configuration of the entire group of acreage that they have there in the Heights, Park Heights neighborhood, it was going to be major expense to turn the racetrack and switch things completely around. The budget people got a hold of it and said, let's keep the track where it is and work on all the surrounding and all the infrastructure that goes into it. And certainly the infrastructure much needed at Pimlico. So we say goodbye to Pimlico. We'll go to Laurel Park starting Friday this week in a couple days. And we're going to stay at Laurel for, it looks like, at least the fact of about 2 years' time. We're hoping to open at Pimlico in 2027. That would be something else. The first Belmont Stakes at the new Belmont Park is slated for 2027 as well, because Belmont Park's construction, which is underway. Richard Migliori had some pictures of the structure going up at Belmont Park. We're starting to see some upward progress now, not just demolition at Belmont Park. That is slated to open in September of 2026, so about a year and a couple months away, still 17, 18 months away maybe from that Belmont Park opening up. And if that opens in September, obviously the Belmont Stakes wouldn't be to the following spring of 2027. So 2027 could be an incredible year in horse racing with new locations for the Triple Crown Series. We shall see. Does Pimlico get open at the same time as Belmont in terms of the Triple Crown? 2027 is the answer for right now. We will see how the Maryland Stadium Authority and the folks in New York finish their projects working forward. Let's talk more about Preakness 150 and what really had everybody buzzing. The international incident inside the 3/16th pole between the French rider Flavien Prat, the Italian rider Umberto Rispoli, as their two mounts went slugging into each other. It was goal-oriented and journalism bouncing off of each other and taking clever again as part of the collateral damage. Let's go back and watch some of the replays here and a couple of the different views and head-ons of what we had. These videos, courtesy, of course, of NBC Sports Journalism in the red cap on the inside. Rispoli's trying to get into a hole that's probably not there, and he's forcing his way through there. Pratt's trying to close the door. That's good race riding in most respects, and the two ended up just bouncing off of each other. There was a steward's inquiry. The stewards ruled no change and no one at fault. This might have been one of those situations where they didn't want to disqualify the best horse in a race as journalism went on to the victory. But again, as you watch the head-on in here, Clevergan on the inside, I think he's without blame in here. I think he's doing what he should be doing and running straight. It clearly looks like Pratt is trying to hem in journalism and Rispoli's not having it. He's trying to get through a hole that may not be there. I think they're both at equal fault, and I think that's kind of why we look at a no disqualification situation. I don't believe the people who look at this replay and say that I believe them. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I don't agree with people who look at it and say this is clearly the fault of one rider or the other. I think they're both at fault in this particular spot. You see the head-on view there with Clever again and how they got through that traffic. but it was journalism just being strong and bullying his way through there. And it was a situation where Rispoli was not taking no for an answer. He put the horse in this spot, as we talked about, and we look at another overhead view of this race, and you come into this situation where they've passed the half-mile pole. He decided not to go out. He stayed to the inside. Now, here he is coming into the top of the stretch, and you see there's not a space there. There's not really a space between these two, and he's going to keep working. And now, Pratt's doing what he's legally allowed to do, I think, in many cases of trying to keep this horse pinned in. I think the action may be in the upper stretch a little bit more egregious on Pratt. And then once he kind of gets to this spot, then, this is where the horse gets knocked sideways in the back end of Go Orient and gets knocked out, and then he's going to react to that. So I think there's a lot going on here in this particular spot. I think here with the elbows and this big lean right there, I think that's something you've got to look at and say that was Pratt. But prior to that and getting in and turning the horse sideways is on Rispoli. So I think it's a foul on both. In NBA terms, I don't know. This is a block charge where they kind of call on both guys. And I don't know. We assess fouls on both, or we call for a jump ball. And in college basketball, we're looking for the possession arrow in here. But look at his stride at the end, though. I mean, this is just a horse who is leaping to victory and really stretching out. Not every horse has that ability, and that is what made journalism special in Preakness 150. But as for the international incident, I don't think either rider gets fined here unless both get fined. Both could get fined for maybe reckless riding or something like that. But in terms of a disqualification, I don't think you take either one of them down because I think they're both a bit at fault here. If you take them both down, then you're placing them both behind Clever again, and that would have put them both in last and next to last. And you would have had a major, you talk about an international incident, you would have had a major incident if you're taking both of those horses down in the Preakness Stakes and placing them last and next to last. I do think American Promise was kind of done at that point. I don't think he would have finished last. So could you say he would have held on to run third or fourth or fifth and get a piece of the purse money? You could make that argument. And if there's a direct, it's a foul, it's a foul. Then the folks with Clever Against can't probably have an argument. They did get cost fifth place in this race. I don't think they would have finished eighth, but we don't, or ninth, but we don't know that. And that's why I never really liked the stewards kind of making those sort of decisions of, what would have happened. Did something happen or did something not happen? In this case, I think two things happened. And so you either take both of them down or you take none of them down. And I think they kind of went with the easier of the two decisions in here. And in terms of who was the best horse in the race, I think there's no question about it. It was journalism. So in this case, I'm okay with the result the way that it was. But I could also look at this and say, if there was a double disqualification in this race, I would not have a big issue with it because I am more of a foul is a foul kind of guy. I just don't think you can say the foul was on Rispoli for sure or the foul was on Pratt for sure. I think there was both things going on in this particular race, and we can debate it till the end of time. That's kind of what's going to make it one of the great sports moments in Triple Crown recent history because that debate can rage on as we move forward. Look, there are still people sore about the 2019 Kentucky Derby disqualification of Maximum Security on the third. Yes, he wiped out half the field. Did it affect the outcome of the race? Probably not. Did I get DQ'd out of a lot of money? Yes. So we still talk about it 6 years later, and they'll be talking about this Preakness Stakes 150 for a long, long time to come. Let's go now to our fourth topic this week on the It's Official podcast. We're still talking Preakness and Derby and Belmont and other supercards around the country because the trend in recent years among members of the racing office and racing secretaries and track marketing departments and track officials who are worried about handle is to just pile all the major stakes races on a single card. We see it on like Florida Derby Day. We see it on Arkansas Derby Day. We see it where they used to have a Festival of the South at Oaklawn where there was stakes like every day. Now they're kind of piled on top of each other more. Arkansas's gotten back away from that and started to spread some of their stakes races back out where the Oaklawn Handicap and the Apple Blossom and races like that aren't all piled up on top of the Arkansas Derby card. And I like that. And I think that's kind of the trend that we need to move back toward because I think this Preakness Stakes showed us one thing. You do not need to pile a bunch of 6, 7, 8 figure, 7 figure races. We're not looking at 8-figure races, but you don't need to pile a bunch of 7-figure races on the undercard of one of these major days to have a huge afternoon. The handle was there for Preakness Stakes number 150, second largest of all time. And you look at $110 million bet on Saturday. This is up there. $110 million is in the category of a Breeders' Cup Saturday. It's in the category of any Belmont Stakes day. This is like among the absolute highest days you will see on the calendar this year. It was up 11% year over year, and they didn't give away hardly any purse money on the undercard. A 14-race card. The other 13 races on Preakness Day, they gave away $1.58 million. A bunch of 100,000, 125, 150,000 kind of races on the undercard, and yet the fans still sent it in at near record levels. Look at the Kentucky Derby Day undercard, $6.8 million almost in purse money, not including the Kentucky Derby itself. And Belmont's probably the biggest. The Belmont Stakes Day is probably the biggest example of these supercards that we have seen in modern times. The Belmont Stakes, once upon a time, had a couple nice races on the undercard. They basically took their entire month of May and June and put it all together on Belmont Stakes Day a few years back when they were trying to up the profile of a Belmont Stakes racing festival. Races like the Met Mile that for decades were on Memorial Day, would have been the big feature race in America this coming week, moved to the Belmont Stakes undercard, and it almost becomes an afterthought. It's like race 7 on Belmont Day, race 10 on Belmont Day. We get these situations where, NYRA is absolutely loaded with grade 1 after grade 1, big money races. And as we mentioned there, $6 million in purses on the undercard for Derby Day, almost $5 million in undercard purses for Belmont Day. I don't think we need it. I think we got to the point of diminishing returns here. I think if you had an all-stakes pick 4 on one of these big days, couple nice races, 3 or 4 nice races on an undercard going into a big stakes race like the Derby, Preakness, or Belmont, I think that would be more than sufficient. You still have pick 5s, you still have pick 6s. You can put together good local stakes races, 100 granders, sort of like what we saw there at Pimlico, a big allowance fields. There's nothing wrong with that on day-to-day racing. And I don't think these big festival cards have to be as stacked as they are now, because what happens is, yes, you make for a record-setting day for the big day, and that's kind of why we're doing it, right? The tracks and the marketing, they're looking for the press release, they're looking for the big splash day, and they're hoping that carries over to other days in the meet. However, what you've done now is you don't have anything on the other days of the meet of any major significance at a lot of these circuits. All the stakes races are lopped into 2 or 3 big days throughout the course of the season, and then other Saturdays just become like nothing to them. And you don't get to see like a great filly on one Saturday, a great sprinter on another Saturday, a great turf horse on another Saturday. The stakes schedules are all just lumped into these big days where you see them all the same day. I mean, do we need Torpedo Anna on the undercard of the Kentucky Oaks Day, right? It's a missed opportunity to me on Oaks Day to see a filly that could bring butts to the seats on another weekend run on an undercard on Kentucky Oaks Day when they were already going to be packed in. And we're going to see this. We're talking a lot about the NYRA card coming up next at Belmont. The race is, of course, at Saratoga here while Belmont's under reconstruction. But that Belmont Stakes Festival, the Met Mile this year is looking to be one of the best races we have seen maybe in a decade. It is lining up to be a who's who of the middle distance and an older horse division. And yet it's going to be an undercard race where it's kind of lost in the shuffle to the Belmont Stakes itself. So could that have brought in a big audience on Labor or Memorial Day this weekend? Absolutely, it could have. Could it have done, great damage on another day at Saratoga, another Saturday at Saratoga later in that meet? Of course it could have. So this is one of those situations where I think too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. We don't need it. And I think the numbers are starting to show that. Oaklawn's had outstanding handle and attendance for their stakes schedule, which is now spread out more than it used to be. And it's not back to the Racing Festival of the South. It's almost like a week-long Racing Festival of the South. It's almost like a month of big races at Oaklawn spread over several weekends between the Oaklawn Handicap, the Apple Blossom, and the Arkansas Derby Day card. Now, still on Arkansas Derby Day, they have 3 or 4 big stakes races, and I kind of think that's the way to do it moving forward. And I think what we saw here at Pimlico on Saturday, look, they had to cut the purse of the Dixie Stakes. That was cut in half from what it was, from $500,000 down to $250,000. A bunch of the undercard stakes races were 150 granders. This worked out well for them, and I think you could have just as much business success on the big days running fewer of the major supercard type stakes races. And then you've got a chance to take advantage of all those new faces and all those new people that you brought the horse racing through the Triple Crown. bring them back on other days when there are other superstars running. I think that could be of some benefit. I'm not one to think that superstar horses solve the game's problems. Most of the game's problems are based on wagering and inefficiencies and value problems in the tote and the pricing and the calls and everything that go alongside that. Those are the major problems in horse racing that need to be fixed. But in terms of scheduling, I think the scheduling would be better if we didn't have all of these races just lumped together on the supercards. Let's wrap things up on this edition of the It's Official podcast with our fifth and final topic. This is our traditional last topic on the podcast. We are back to previewing the stars of tomorrow on our fifth and final topic each week. We go back to Friday's first race on the undercard on Black-Eyed Susan Day at Pimlico. Verifier was an impressive winner at Colonial Downs in his career debut. The 3-year-old has taken some time to get to the racetrack, but the son of Authentic upped his record to 2 for 2 in very impressive fashion.
It's Verifier who turns her home. The chasing Saxon there on the outside. Verifier given the cue to open and pop away once more. Does it 2.5 lengths in front from Saxon second and straight to Water. Then back to blow by him and Change My World only for a minor share. Verifier. Easy work for Verifier. Verifier and Flavian Pratt when going away. Widening the margin to almost 7 at the finish. Saxon just saying second from straight.
Verifier won to watch. Again, the son of Authentic, now 2 for 2. The dam side leads to sprints. Both wins have been by more than 6 lengths. I think this horse will be a top-notch 3-year-old sprinter to keep an eye on. Will he wheel back in 3 weeks' time and try something like the Woody Stevens? That might be biting off a bit too much, but you can see this horse in the Amsterdam, maybe heading towards a big race at Saratoga this summer. Certainly the 3-year-old races in the sprint scene really kind of focus on the NYRA circuit from this time of the year moving forward. So I would expect Verifier to get some shots at NYRA. Could he run in the Woody Stevens on Belmont Day? Possibly, but more likely something like the Amsterdam at Saratoga and then try to work towards the Allen Jerkins, the major grade 1 at Saratoga for the 3-year-old sprinters later in the year. The Gallant Bob, a big money race at Parks in September, one where you might see this horse running on the Pennsylvania Derby undercard. But I think Verifier, a sprinter to watch and maybe one to watch even towards a Breeders' Cup sprint if he runs a couple big stakes races between now and November. He's our star of tomorrow this week on the It's Official podcast. Let's review our topics this week. Journalism raised the roof with a sensational final 1/8 of a mile, getting through all the trouble to win the Preakness Stakes and set up a potential matchup of the top 3 finishers in the Kentucky Derby at the Belmont Stakes in 3 weeks' time. We say goodbye to Pimlico and all the history there, 155 years at the facility. We're going to stay at Pimlico proper with the same racetrack, but everything else is going to be new around it, hopefully when it reopens in 2027. The international incident inside the 3/16th pole between Flavian Pratt and Umberto Rispoli shook up the Pimlico stretch and shook up the result of the Preakness Stakes. We looked at all the different handicapping angles and talked about the steward's mindset in that controversial decision. It's time to rethink the supercards, as a second highest Preakness handle of all time was achieved with about a quarter of the undercard purse money given away to the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. You can do it without throwing grade 1s up and down the line. And our stars of tomorrow wrap things up with Verifier, a 3-year-old by Authentic, now 2 for 2 lifetime for trainer Brad Cox and Resolute Racing. $1 million 2-year-old purchase didn't start at 2, but he's looking good at 3, making up for lost time. Those 5 topics are now official because my partner Jeff Siegel and I say so. We hope to get Jeff back with us sometime soon as he's recovering for some illness. Certainly your thoughts and prayers for Jeff are more than welcome here on the podcast. Be sure to leave your comments, follow him on Twitter and X at JSiegel Racing, and send along your well wishes to my partner. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great day. I'll be back on Friday with guest handicapper Scott Shapiro as we handicap 8 key stakes races for this weekend on the First Call podcast. Have a great day, everybody.